He claimed absolute dominion over the shattered sect, its power now his to command. Yet this same man once faced a brutal end, stripped of everything he held dear. Then the crimson interface appeared, whispering a new path, the sovereign's blood. Every enemy's demise fueled his demonic energy, unlocking terrifying new abilities. But the sovereign's blood demanded more. They called me Cole, the weakest disciple in the Azure Cloud sect. Every day was a reminder, a bruise, a hunger in my gut that never truly went away. Julian, my only friend in this place, offered a meager ration. He was as weak as I was, which meant the others always found us. Lena, a gifted senior disciple, always found new ways to mock. Her words cut deeper than any whip, leaving wounds that never bled. Audrey, Grand Elder Victor's favored disciple, watched with a cold, elegant smile that promised worse than words. Grand Elder Victor himself, the architect of my suffering, would sometimes pass through the grounds. He never even saw me. The hunger was a constant companion. My body ached, my spirit felt hollowed out. Each day was just a slower descent into nothing. Then came the decree, the annual cleansing ritual, a euphemism, I knew, for public punishment and a convenient way to dispose of the weak. They came for me at dusk. No one spoke a word. The path led away from the sect, deeper into the mountains, towards the forgotten cave. Inside the cave, the blows started. Each one a familiar echo of every day I had ever lived here, amplified by the cold, damp air. The pain was absolute, but the despair was worse. My own blood stained the ancient stones, a testament to my utter failure. Then silence. They left me for dead, a broken thing in the cold darkness. This was the end, my end. My blood pooled on the mossy rock, and then from deep within the stone, a faint crimson glow began to pulse. It called to something inside me. The beast lunged. I didn't think. The blood in my veins pulsed, a new kind of heat. My hand moved on its own. It was a reflex, or something far older. The cold seeped into my bones. My blood pooled on the ancient stone, dark and spreading. Then from deep within the rock, a faint, unsettling crimson glow began to pulse. It wasn't fading. It was growing. The crimson light flared, blinding. It wasn't just coming from the walls anymore. It was everywhere. And then, it was inside my head, a searing, impossible interface, blood red against the darkness. A voice, not my own, echoed in the interface. Power. A price. I was dying. What other choice did I have? The words shimmered, demanding an answer. I pressed yes, a jolt. Not just pain, but a tearing, reconstructing agony. My body screamed, but something shifted. Something new was being forged. The pain subsided, replaced by a cold, unsettling awareness. The interface flickered again, a new gauge, a price. It was always a price. The system offered me a skill, a blood shard, crude, basic. But the instructions flowed directly into my mind, as if I'd always known them. It was a terrifying kind of instinct, a scuttling sound. Something else was in the dark, drawn by the scent of blood. Another predator. I was still weak, still vulnerable, but not defenseless. Not anymore. It was crude, instinctual, but it worked. The shard tore through the air, a raw, desperate strike. The beast roared, a sound of pain, not hunger. The beast fell, dissolving into a fine mist of crimson energy. A surge, pure power. The system hummed, satisfied, blued as sensicorded. I was alive, bruised, aching, but alive. A terrifying new hunger gnawed at my gut, a craving for more of that crimson mist. This was a new reality, my reality. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It had given me life, but it wanted more, and I felt it too, a primal, insatiable need. The hunt had just begun. They moved through the training grounds, oblivious. Their laughter echoed sharp and clear. I knew that sound. It was the laugh of privilege, of power, of those who had never known true hunger. Not yet, anyway. The hunger was a living thing inside me now, a constant gnawing emptiness. It was worse than any pain they had inflicted. The crimson text on the interface pulsed, a mocking reminder of my new reality. The system demanded. It didn't ask. I had accepted its gift, and now it was time to pay. My body screamed for sustenance, a hunger that went beyond mere food. I had nothing left to lose. Fear still lingered, a phantom limb, but a new resolve hardened my bones. If this was the price of survival, I would pay it. Every drop, a mutated cave crawler, all chitin and segmented legs. It was small, pathetic, but it was alive. and its blood was exactly what the system craved. My first kill as a sovereign. The warmth of its life drained into me. It was repulsive, instinctive. The system didn't care for my revulsion, only for the essence, and I could feel it working. A jolt, a sudden potent surge. The hunger receded, replaced by a raw new strength. The system had delivered. My first taste of true power, earned in blood and darkness. Then a deeper hum. Not just strength, but something colder. Something ancient. A whisper of demonic energy stirring within me, promising something more terrifying than simple power. The corruption gauge flickered. My body felt new, reshaped. The aches were still there, but muted, distant. The system had given me enough to survive, to move, to plan. It was time to leave this tomb. The sect patrols moved like clockwork. Predictable, arrogant in their certainty that no threat could come from the forest or from the weakness they had discarded. They wouldn't even know I was here. The familiar structures of the sect appeared through the trees. My former home. A place of torment, not sanctuary. I was a ghost returning, unseen, unheard, but utterly changed. Their rules no longer applied to me. Lena, Audrey. Still laughing, still oblivious. They moved with the easy confidence of those who believe themselves untouchable. They had no idea the ghost they had created was watching, and he was very, very hungry. My gaze locked onto him. The system pulsed, a low, satisfied hum in my veins. This was the first step. The first name on a very long list. They hadn't changed. Not one bit. Lena, Audrey. Their voices still carried the same cruel, casual disdain, cutting through the morning air like blades. And Victor still perched on his high seat, watching over his little kingdom of cruelty. His presence was a heavy weight, a constant reminder of what they had done. Then I saw Julian, still small, still struggling, still carrying the weight of their disdain. That familiar ache in my chest was the only thing that felt real. The sect's perimeter was a maze of forgotten paths and overgrown thickets. Perfect. They wouldn't even know I was here, moving in the shadows. It was a crude process, visceral. But the system needed its fuel, and the forest provided. I felt the familiar thrum as the essence flowed. Another drop. The system registered it. A cold, precise confirmation. Then the familiar surge. A new lightness in my step. Agility. It was working. My muscles tightened, then loosened, responding with new speed. It wasn't just a number on a screen. It was real. A subtle shift in the world itself. He was a familiar face. Lin, always sneering, always laughing at the weak. He had a particularly nasty habit of tripping Julian on his way to the mess hall. Direct confrontation was not the way. Not yet. Humiliation, though, that was a different kind of weapon. One that cut deeper than any blade. It wouldn't be grand. It wouldn't be loud. Just a small, precise push. A nudge that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his own importance. The night air was cold. Still, I waited. He would come this way. He always did. And this time, he wouldn't be laughing. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Disciple Kale was a crumpled heap. That was the moment. He deserved every inch of that fall. The night had passed, but the target remained. This morning, the training grounds hummed with expectation, and Kale strode in, oblivious. Kale was a typical bully, loud, arrogant, always finding the weakest to pick on. He thought his place was secure. He was wrong. His arrogance was a weakness. My system was a scalpel, a tiny prick, a subtle shift in the air pressure, a whisper of blood energy. Kale spun, almost tripping over his own feet. He blamed the loose stone. He blamed the wind. He didn't blame me. Not yet. Lena scoffed. Audrey just rolled her eyes. They saw only incompetence, another weakling disciple making a fool of himself, just like they always saw me. He recovered, but the seed of doubt was planted. My agility stat wasn't just for movement. It was for precision, for making the impossible look like a clumsy mistake. Kale's face was flushed with anger, his movements stiff. He was losing control. The whispers started among the other disciples. My resentment hummed. One final precise push. A tremor in the ground beneath his feet, a twist in his own balance. The system acknowledged my vengeance. The laughter was immediate, sharp, and cruel. Kale was a public spectacle. Lena and Audrey merely smirked, still blind to the true architect. The hum of demonic energy was a low thrum in my veins. My eyes found Julian's across the crowd. His expression wasn't amusement. It was something else. Recognition. Kale finally scrambled up, humiliated and enraged, storming off. I turned away, melting back into the shadows. The system hummed. A low, satisfied thrum. This was only the beginning. Lena's challenge hung in the air, a cruel smirk on her face. She expected fear, surrender, but I had moved past fear. I just smiled. Kale's humiliation had felt good. The system had hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It was the first taste of real power, and it demanded more. But I wasn't the only one paying attention. Iris, a scholar disciple. She saw patterns where others saw only bad luck. I didn't know what she was looking for, but I knew where she'd find it. The forbidden library. She spent hours there, sifting through the texts no one else dared to touch, searching for answers to questions no one else even thought to ask. While Iris searched for answers, I worked. Not with the system's full power, not yet. Just enough to look like a breakthrough. Julian watched, his worry growing. Whispers started. Luck, they called it. A sudden breakthrough. They didn't know the cost, or the source. The whispers reached Lena. Cole? Lucky? Her face twisted with annoyance. She couldn't stand the idea of me rising, even a little. She strode directly towards me, her eyes burning with challenge. Cole, she sneered. Let's see how much that luck helps you in a real spar. Her cruel smirk faltered when I met her gaze. I accepted. A cold, unsettling smile, a flicker of crimson in my eyes. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The system pulsed, a low thrum echoing the challenge. It wasn't just a sparring match, it was an opportunity. I turned my back, walking away from Lena's stunned silence. My mind was already calculating. The next move, the next taste of demonic energy, and the next step closer to true sovereignty. Her face was a mask of pure, venomous hatred. I stood over her, the training ground silent, and felt the hum of power in my veins. It was a good feeling, a cold one. Lena's challenge had been public, meant to humiliate. Her smirk was fixed, a cruel promise. I met her gaze, a cold smile of my own, and accepted what she thought was her victory. She moved like a blur, her light blue robes a streak across the stone. Every strike was precise, aimed to wound my pride. I gave ground, letting her believe she was still in control. Then it flickered, a crimson edge around her form, a faint pulse before each attack. My mind registered it, even as my body moved. The system was learning. Lena pressed harder, faster, her frustration growing. She couldn't understand why I wasn't falling, why her perfect strikes kept missing by inches. The blood sense showed me the gaps. A few disciples in the crowd started to murmur, eyes widening. It wasn't just luck anymore. My movements were too fluid, too precise. Every dodge felt like a whisper of impossible grace. She left an opening, a fraction of a second. I moved, not with brute force, but with a flick of my wrist, a precise counter. Her blade spun, catching the light, then clattered to the stone. Lena froze. Her eyes were wide, then narrowed. Disbelief, then a burning rage. She looked at her empty hand, then at me. Her entire world had just tilted. Grand Elder Victor, usually impassive, shifted in his seat on the dais. His brow furrowed just slightly. Annoyance. But something else too. A flicker of something I hadn't seen before. The referee, a stern-faced elder, raised his hand. Cole wins. The words hung in the air, a declaration Lena couldn't deny. The silence in the arena was absolute then, broken by a stunned gasp from the crowd. I felt it then. A cold thrum, a satisfied pulse from deep within, the taste of her humiliation, sharp and potent. The system hummed its approval. Another step, another price paid. Lena rose slowly, her eyes burning into mine. This isn't over, she snarled, the words a promise of future pain. I felt a surge of energy, but also a deeper, unsettling coldness spreading through me. The cost was clear. I saw her eyes in the cold open. Audrey, watching. But she couldn't know what she was seeing. Not truly. Not yet. Lena's hatred was a bitter taste, but the system had devoured it. Another 20 points. That was the price of her fury, and a coldness I was beginning to recognize. Victor had always dismissed me. Now my luck was an irritation he couldn't ignore. His annoyance tasted like opportunity. He wanted me watched. He wanted my trick exposed. Audrey would find nothing, because she wasn't looking for a demon. While Victor plotted, others sought answers in the shadows. Iris, in her dusty sanctuary, was closer than anyone knew. The words were ancient, forbidden, blood-bound arts. Parasitic awakening. A chill that had nothing to do with the draft in the library. The system hummed. A minor task, a simple obstacle course. But to the right eyes, it was another lesson in humiliation for them. He cursed, blaming the uneven ground. I said nothing. The system had already collected its toll. Julian. My only friend. He saw what I was becoming, and it terrified him. He spoke of my soul, of who I used to be. I told him he was wrong. I was not wrong. Julian walked away, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, and felt nothing. Audrey, hidden in the bamboo, was still watching. The glow was there again. Just a flicker. But she saw it. And for the first time, Audrey truly wondered what I was. The shimmering lines of Victor's array pulsed with contained energy, a web of power meant to expose any hidden truth. But the system just whispered, a low, satisfied hum in my blood. Audrey's words were precise, clinical, a faint crimson glow, elder, gone in an instant. Victor listened, his gaze fixed on the scroll in his hand, but I knew he was seeing me. He dismissed Audrey with a wave. The problem wasn't a glow, it was an anomaly. Something he couldn't control, and Victor couldn't tolerate anything he couldn't control. Iris knew the forbidden texts. She knew the whispers in the dark corners of the library. Now, her finger traced the symbols for blood-bound arts, the corruption, the price. It was all there. The hunger was a constant ache now, a low thrum beneath my skin. My eyes burned, a faint crimson glow that faded only when I fought it. The system demanded more. Always more. The usual sources were too slow, too risky. I needed something faster, something that wouldn't draw attention. But the thoughts that came to mind were darker, colder, and closer than I liked. Julian was tending the spirit herb garden, humming a tuneless song. He looked up, startled, as Iris approached. She was always so quiet, a ghost in the corners of the sect. She spoke of unnatural hunger and corrupted essence. Julian just nodded, distracted by a wilting leaf. He saw only the mundane, never the abyss opening at his feet. Victor personally supervised the array's activation. Each shimmering line, each intricate symbol, was a trap. A cage for anything that strayed from the righteous path. The summons was formal, sealed with Victor's personal mark. Report to the Grand Elder's study, immediately. It wasn't a request, it was an order, and orders from Victor always meant trouble. Every step down the polished halls was a reminder of their contempt. Every gaze, a judgment. They still saw the weak disciple. They had no idea what walked among them now. He stood by the shimmering array, a predator waiting. I saw it instantly, the subtle energy fluctuations, the hidden nodes, a trap, designed for me, designed for the darkness within me. Victor's smile widened, a thin, cruel line. He had no idea what he was facing, but the system did, and it offered a solution, a dangerous one. Bypass, it whispered. And I listened. My vision blurred. The world fractured into crimson shards, twisting into an impossible spiral. I felt a scream tear through my throat, but no sound escaped. Only a cold, burning hunger remained. The crimson haze vanished, leaving only the shimmering array before me. Victor watched, his expression unreadable. The system's whispers were a low thrum against my skull, promising power, demanding blood. I began the orthodox sequence. Every move was a slow, deliberate lie. The array pulsed, demanding precision, mocking my feigned effort. Victor's gaze felt like a physical weight. My essence pool was a barren well. The orthodox methods were a dead end. The system's hunger amplified, a gnawing ache in my bones, demanding I abandon the pretense. Failure was not an option. Not here, not again. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. The system offered its solution, a whisper that became a command. I accepted. A thread of blood essence, invisible to all but me, seeped into the array. It mimicked the natural flow, a perfect deception. The system hummed, satisfied. The array flickered, threatening to expose my deception. I poured more into the weave, maintaining the illusion, the strain burning behind my eyes. It was barely enough. Then, a click. The array stabilized, its light settling into a steady hum. I had done it. I had passed Victor's trap. The victory felt hollow, tainted. A notification flashed confirming the skill. But the corruption gauge, it had spiked, a cold, sickening weight in my chest. The crimson flicker returned, stronger this time. Victor dismissed me, his voice calm, but his eyes lingered. He'd sensed something, not proof, not yet, but enough to know I was a problem he now needed to solve. Julian met my gaze outside the study, his face pale. He'd seen the flicker, felt the change. His fear was a palpable thing, a wall rising between us. My last friend was pulling away. Victor's voice cut through my thoughts, dismissing me like a nuisance. I turned, a phantom hunger already stirring in my veins. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. The system throbbed, a low, satisfied hum. It demanded more. And I knew, with chilling certainty, Victor would soon provide the means. He had just signed his own fate. The small creature shivered, its life force draining into me. A cold rush, then a sickening emptiness. The system pulsed. I felt it. The hunger momentarily sated, and the price. Victor's glare burned into my back even after the door closed. The system pulsed, a low, demanding thrum in my veins. It wanted more, always more. I spent hours in the sect's forgotten corners, searching for anything. Old medicinal herbs, withered spirit plants, anything that held a whisper of life. It was useless. The lowing of the sect's spirit beasts carried on the wind. Fat, healthy creatures raised for food and labor. My gaze lingered on them, a new, unsettling thought taking root. The system responded to my dark thoughts. A crimson window flashed, offering a solution. A new skill, simple and direct, for a price. Blood siphon. A direct means to harvest life. It felt wrong. But the hunger was a persistent ache, a cold knot in my gut. And Victor's next trap would not be subtle. I chose a remote path, deep in the mountains. A small, isolated creature, far from prying eyes. It was a test, I told myself. Just a test. A whisper of energy, a crimson thread extending from my palm. The creature barely twitched. Its warmth, its life flowed into me. It was quick. Too quick. The warmth receded, leaving behind a cold husk. I pulled my hand back, a tremor running through me. This was what I had become. A predator. But beneath the revulsion, a different feeling stirred. A surge of power, a primal satisfaction. The hunger, momentarily quieted, replaced by a dark, intoxicating hum. The system confirmed the transaction. New essence, and the gauge it climbed, a slow, insistent creep toward an unseen limit. The cost was clear, etched in crimson numbers. Each gain felt like a loss. Each surge of power, another step away from the boy I was. But the boy I was had nothing. And this was everything. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. A shiver of dread ran down my spine, but the hunger was momentarily sated. For now, what would it demand next? The surge hit like a wave, electric and cold. More power. Always more. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It was pleased. I wasn't sure what that made me. The sated hunger was a temporary reprieve. The system's true demand lingered, a constant gnawing presence. It wanted more. It always wanted more, and I knew where I had to go to get it. The spirit beast stables. A rich, tempting source, but also heavily guarded. The sect's wealth, their pride. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was a calculated strike against them. A way in. The system offered it, a whispered promise in my blood. A new skill, born of shadow and stealth. It was exactly what I needed. For now, shadow step. It felt like an extension of the night itself. I moved, not like a person, but like a whisper, a shifting phantom. The old Cole would have stumbled. This Cole simply flowed, a patrol. Two guards, their lanterns swinging. They talked, laughed. They saw nothing. Not a flicker. Not a sound. I was already past them, a ghost in their own territory. The stables reeked of hay and animal, and blood essence. I felt it, a faint thrumming from deep within. An isolated stall, a large, placid spirit beast, perfect and helpless. Blood siphon. The skill felt different this time, more potent, more demanding. A crimson mist snaked from my hand, wrapping around the beast. It barely stirred. The essence flowed, cold, efficient, horrifying. 10 units of blood essence. Agility increased. The rush was undeniable, a cold fire in my veins, but the corruption gauge flickered, a chilling reminder of the price. 9%, closer to the abyss. No witnesses, no trace. I was careful. Almost, a single crimson-tinged feather, dislodged from my bracer, lay unnoticed on the straw. Tiny, insignificant, for now. The return was swifter, easier. Shadow Step made the perimeter wall a trivial obstacle. I vanished into the night, the sect none the wiser. Their arrogance was their blind spot. My power, their coming ruin. The power settled, a cold, hard certainty. The hunger was sated for now, but the feather, a tiny detail, a mistake. My only one, and someone would find it, eventually. The crimson shard spun a whirlwind of death. Audrey screamed, a sound that tore through the quiet training grounds. I felt nothing but the system's cold satisfaction. The stable master found it at dawn, a single crimson-tipped feather. He brought it to Iris, who already knew what it meant and where to take it. Sect leader Sebastian, a man who valued tradition above all else. Iris spoke of unnatural energies and ancient texts. She didn't have to name Victor directly. He understood. Meanwhile, Audrey found her own feather. Victor's orders were clear. Find the source of this desecration. Bring them to justice. She knew exactly where to look. The old training grounds were empty, or so they thought, but my blood sense hummed. A low vibration in my skull. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. They emerged from the shadows, Audrey leading them. Her eyes, cold and triumphant, were fixed on me. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution. The system thrummed, a hungry beast stirring. I had no choice but to feed it. A single word formed in my mind: barrage. The air tore open. Crimson shards, sharp as razors, erupted from my hands. Audrey screamed, hitting the ground hard. The others scattered, terrified. Then, a new presence. Heavy, furious. Victor. He strode onto the platform, his eyes wide with disbelief, then a cold, terrible rage. He saw the crimson trails, the terrified faces, Audrey's bleeding arm. He saw the demonic power, his face twisted with absolute fury. The disdain was gone. Only hatred remained. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. This was what it wanted. To be seen, to be feared, and I had given it everything. Victor's eyes, wide with shock and rage, met Cole's. The Grand Elder's next words, a furious roar, echoed across the sect. "He is a demon! Hunt him down!" The world blurred, a sharp tug in my core, a primal instinct taking over. They were close, the system pulsed a low thrum against the chaos. Victor's voice still echoed in my ears. "He is a demon! Hunt him down!" The sect leader, Sebastian, stood stiffly on the dais, his face unreadable. Victor demanded immediate action, tradition on his side. But I could almost feel Iris's earlier warnings, quiet words about strange energy, still lingering in Sebastian's mind. Tradition always won. Sebastian's voice, when it came, was heavy with a reluctant authority. The decree was absolute. I was a pariah. The decree was a death sentence, but they were still disorganized. My agility, honed by the system, kept me one step ahead, a ghost in their own familiar grounds. Every shadow was a potential escape, every rustle of leaves a warning. They thought they knew these paths. They didn't know what I had become. Julian. He was probably still near the Grand Hall. I wondered if he'd seen Audrey. Her injuries were a testament to what I could do now. He'd heard the decree. He'd seen Audrey. Julian knew what I was becoming. The last thread of our friendship, stretched thin, was finally snapping. They swept past, shouting. I pressed myself against the cold stone, a heartbeat from being discovered. My blood sense hummed, guiding me, keeping me out of reach. They wouldn't give up. Not now. Running was just delaying the inevitable. The system resonated, not with fear, but with a different kind of hunger. The sounds of the hunt were getting closer. I could feel their presence, a growing tide of hostility. This forgotten corner would soon be found. I was cornered. But the system pulsed, a deep, insistent thrum in my veins. Fight or be consumed. There was only one choice left. The stench of scorched earth filled the air. I had done this. Lena's face, pale and streaked with crimson, was a mask of pure terror. She finally understood what I truly was. The shouts grew closer. They hunted me like an animal, pushed me to this edge. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. Fight, it whispered, or be consumed. Then they emerged. Lena, her face a sneer of triumph, leading a squad of disciples. She wanted to reclaim her pride. I knew exactly what that meant for me. They spread out, forming a semicircle. Lena raised her hand, a signal. They thought I was trapped. They thought they had me. Their arrogance was a mistake. My blood thrummed, a new name forming in my mind. Blood Nova. The system responded, eager for the carnage. A crimson wave erupted from me, tearing through the air. It wasn't just blood. It was vengeance. It was pure, unadulterated power. The air crackled. Silence. The disciples lay scattered, groaning, their bodies broken but not dead. I had shown them mercy but felt none. Lena stared at me, her face pale, her previous arrogance completely gone. Only fear remained. It was a beautiful sight. They were defeated, broken. The system demanded its due. My hand moved, drawn by an instinct that was no longer entirely my own. A surge, warm, potent energy flooded my veins. It was sickening. It was exhilarating. Another step, another fragment of power claimed. The price, of course, always the price. A cold dread, a familiar hum, deepening within my very core. The corruption was growing. I turned, leaving them in the silence. Lena didn't move, she just watched me go, her eyes holding a fear that would forever haunt her. They called it an anomaly, a rogue practitioner. But the energy signature I'd tracked wasn't just rogue. It was ancient, and it was exactly where I needed it to be. The taste of iron still lingered in the air. Lena's face was a mask of terror, etched with the memory of what she'd seen. Her eyes followed the fading crimson trail where I had been. My legs burned, the system pulsed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. But the satisfaction was tainted. The corruption gauge felt like a brand. I pushed deeper, past collapsed sections, until the air grew still. This was where the sect's memory ended, and where my new life would begin for now. The adrenaline faded, leaving only the dull ache of my bones and the system's quiet hum. The red glow of the gauge pulsed, a constant reminder of the monster I was becoming. My research led me to these tunnels decades ago. They were meant to be forgotten, a secret graveyard for what the sect deemed too dangerous, or too potent. It wasn't hard to follow the trail. The raw demonic energy he left behind was like a beacon to anyone who knew how to look. And I always knew how to look. He was here, unaware, and more powerful than any cultivator I'd ever studied. The system's whispers were growing louder even from this distance. A shadow shifted. I was on my feet, blood sense flaring, crimson energy sparking around my bracers. I hadn't sensed her approach, not until now. "Sovereign's blood system," she said, her voice calm. She knew the name, the forbidden name, a potent, ancient, blood-bound art, one rarely seen in this era. "It's not just corruption," she continued, her voice dropping. "That's merely the symptom. The true cost is becoming a vessel for its master." She offered a deal, information for information. My power, her knowledge, a dangerous game. But I needed answers, and she clearly had them. The words were a cold blade, carving away my hope. This wasn't just power, it was a slow, insidious consumption, a transformation into something that was no longer me. Iris's voice was calm, cutting through the ringing in my ears. "It has a master, Cole, and it hungers for more than just blood." I watched her saying nothing. I finally spoke, my voice rough. "What makes you so sure? What do you know about powers like this?" I needed to test her, to see if she was just guessing. Iris didn't flinch. She simply reached into her wide sleeve. "Knowledge, Cole. Ancient knowledge, hidden from those who only seek brute strength." She unrolled the parchment. The words were a language I barely recognized, but the system in my veins pulsed with recognition. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. Iris read aloud, her voice steady. "Vessel systems, dormant sovereigns, consuming the host, transforming them into puppets." Each word felt like a chain tightening around my soul. I hesitated, then made a choice to gain her trust. I had to show her something. A flicker of crimson light. The basic UI elements appeared, floating before us. Iris's eyes scanned the interface, sharp and calculating. "Demonic stats? Sovereign's art?" She paused, her gaze narrowing. "But where is the corruption gauge?" She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "The system feeds on you, Cole. It shapes your desires, your hunger. Slowly, irrevocably, it becomes you." The words echoed inside me. Every urge, every flicker of rage, every surge of power. It wasn't just mine, it was the system's. I was a puppet, and the strings were already tightening. My humanity was a fading ember. But the rage still burned. If I was to be a vessel, then I would be a vessel of destruction. For the sect, for Victor, for everything they took. Iris nodded, as if reading my thoughts. "My research continues. Your progress will be invaluable." She didn't offer comfort, only a cold, calculated alliance. The ancient text lay open, its words chilled me to the bone. I finally understood. The system wasn't just a tool, it was a prison, and I was already inside. A flicker of crimson, then nothing. I pulled the shadow around me, letting it swallow my form, a breath held in the dark. This new power was a strange, chilling comfort. The words of the ancient text still burned in my mind. A prison, not a tool. Every ounce of strength I gained, every skill, was a link in a chain I didn't even know existed. Victor's rage would be absolute. He wouldn't let Lena's humiliation stand. I knew the sect leader would move against me, but not like this. A prickle on my skin. The cave felt colder somehow. My blood sense reached out, past the damp rock, past the mountain itself. The air was thick with something new. They were hunting me. Not just the usual fools, specialized. I needed something new, something to make me disappear. The system offered a path, a searing pain as the essence flowed. The system hummed, satisfied, but the crimson numbers on the gauge pulsed, growing brighter, a chilling reminder of the price. The shadows were my allies now. Every flicker, every shift, a new lesson. I moved. A blur of motion, a ghost in my own training ground. Victor would not be pleased. His elite were proving useless. I could almost hear his frustrated roar from here, across the entire sect. They were close, too close. But the blood cloak held, a whisper in the wind, a rustle of leaves. They searched, and I watched, unseen. The hunger was a constant companion now, a low thrum beneath my skin. The system whispered promises, always promises, and each one tightened the chains, just a little more. They blanketed the mountain, their specialized tracking skills honed, every path, every hidden crevice. They would find me, eventually, unless I stopped running. Their patterns were predictable, their weaknesses visible. The hunt had begun, but the prey was learning faster than the hunters could adapt. A shadow detached itself from the wall, a deep crimson pulse emanating from within. I knew the hunt had just begun, and I was the prey. But not for long. The shadows around me pulsed, not with my will, but with a life of their own. A blade flashed too fast. I felt the burn, but the crimson shroud held, barely. The shadow detached itself from the wall, a deep crimson pulse emanating from within. I knew the hunt had just begun, and I was the prey. But not for long. Their movements were precise, practiced. They didn't rush. They cornered me in the narrow pass, blades glinting. This wasn't some training exercise. This was an execution. The cloak absorbed the worst of it, a blunt impact, not a clean cut. But the system still demanded its price. Every defense, every breath, cost more than just energy. They pressed the attack, relentless. But I had faced worse. My blood hummed, answering their aggression with its own darker pulse. They still saw a weak disciple. They were wrong. Another blade caught me, a deeper cut this time. The cloak flickered, straining. My vision blurred, not from pain, but from a growing red haze. The system wanted more. The gauge screamed. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, threatening to drown everything else. I wanted to tear them apart, limb from limb. This was the system's true voice. I pushed it down, just barely. The rage receded, leaving a cold, sharp focus. They were still targets, and the mission was not yet complete. I moved. 5 bodies. None dead, just broken. But the smell of their blood, the silent thrum of the system, it was all I could feel. The rage still lingered, a phantom limb. I saw him then, a flicker of movement behind the rocks. Julian. He was watching. His face, even from this distance, was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He had seen too much. He hadn't seen the corruption. He hadn't felt the hunger. He only saw the monster. And that was enough. I turned, leaving the broken bodies, leaving Julian to his fear. He had won. But the shudder in his hands was not from exhaustion. It was from the chilling realization that the system's control was deepening, and the true cost was only just beginning to reveal itself. His voice, usually calm, was now a roar. Victor had always been a storm of pride. But this was something else. He would rather watch the sect burn than admit he was wrong. The echoes of that primal surge still vibrated in my bones. Julian's face, pale and horrified, was a mirror of the monster I'd almost become. He had seen too much. My path was set, but their reactions were still useful. The sect was a machine, and machines had weak points. I just needed to find the right gear to break. The reports piled up. Each one a litany of failures. Each failure, another crack in the sect's facade. My actions, their consequences. It was a beautiful symmetry. Iris. She moved like a shadow, always there when a secret was about to crack open. Her words were always precise, a scalpel finding the fault lines. She hadn't said much but enough. The sect's reputation, Victor's temper. The threads were there, waiting to be pulled. He knew it too. The system hummed. Discord, division, demonic energy. It was almost too easy. Another crack in their perfect world, another drop in my cup. Sebastian made his move. The message was simple. Victor, meet me in the grand hall. The stage was set for their inevitable collision. Sebastian tried to reason, to talk of reputation, of consequence, but Victor heard only weakness, only a challenge to his authority. It was always about him. Contain him? Victor's voice cut through the hall, thick with contempt. There was no containing a demon, only destroying it, and he saw only a demon. The chasm between them was now visible, a gaping wound in the sect's authority. Victor stormed out, leaving Sebastian standing alone, the weight of his office suddenly heavier. He was the sect leader, but even leaders had to face the consequences of their choices. He had chosen tradition. Now tradition was turning on itself. Victor slammed his fist on the table, his words echoing through the grand hall. Contain him? He is a demon. There is only one path. Sebastian watched him leave, a deep frown etched on his face. The sect was fracturing. Cole knew exactly what that meant. He stood at the dais, his voice calm, but the words were a sharpened blade. I wasn't there, but I could feel the tremor it sent through the sect. It was a declaration of war. Sebastian's frown had deepened. He knew the cost of defying Victor, but the sect was fracturing. He had to choose between tradition and survival, and Iris was there to whisper the way. The sect pulsed with a new kind of unrest. A low hum in my veins mirrored the tension. The system's hunger, a quiet, insidious pressure. It demanded more, always more. The new decree was simple enough on paper. On the ground, it meant Victor's favored disciples were being reassigned, his resources subtly diverted. The sect leader was finally moving his pieces. He had always been untouchable. Now, Sebastian chipped away at his authority, piece by piece. The rage was a physical thing, a tremor in his hands he fought to suppress. The lull was a gift. My movements became pure shadow, my presence a ghost. Blood cloak hummed, a second skin, a mastery I hadn't thought possible. It was almost too easy. Iris understood the currents of power. She had played her hand, subtle and precise. Now, she simply watched, a predator assessing the field, waiting for the next move. Blood sense extended my reach, a network of whispers across the sect. The patrols were indeed less coordinated, their movements disjointed. Victor's influence was waning, even if he refused to see it. Sebastian believed he had asserted control, that the sect would stabilize. He saw the surface ripples, not the dark currents churning beneath. He had no idea what he had truly unleashed. The system hummed, a louder, more insistent thrum. The hunger intensified, a raw, primal demand that echoed in my bones. It wanted more. It always wanted more blood essence. Victor had retreated, not in defeat, but to gather his strength. His face was a mask of cold fury, his hands now still. He was a serpent, coiled and ready to strike. Sebastian's maneuver had created a rift, a weakness, but Victor was not broken. His cold resolve was a promise of retribution. The sect was fracturing, and the real game was only just beginning. The challenge scroll landed on the rough stone, heavy with the seal of authority. But it was the unspoken clause, the subtle tremor in the air, that truly caught my attention. This was no ordinary invitation. Victor's cold resolve, I remembered it clearly. Sebastian's decree had only fueled his rage. He wasn't one to accept a slight, not with his pride. This was just the beginning of his retaliation. Victor wasn't just planning, he was plotting. A furious, desperate kind of plotting that shattered traditions. I could almost hear the crackle of his rage from here. He bypassed Sebastian, bypassing every rule. Victor was gathering his own loyalists, whispering promises of glory, fueling their ambition. Audrey was already there, her eyes shining with cold zeal. My blood sense stretched, a crimson web through the sect's hidden veins. Fragments. Anger. Ambition. The whispers of a great exhibition amplified, but with a new dark resonance. Something was off. Iris knew the sect better than anyone. She saw the patterns, the subtle shifts. Victor's movements wouldn't escape her notice, not if she was looking for them. And I knew she was always looking. She had her own agenda always, but Victor's recklessness would disrupt her careful plans too. A common enemy. That was all it took for her to act, for her to send me a thread, a small folded paper bird tucked into the hollow of a dead tree near my hidden entrance. Iris's mark. It held no words, but the way its wings were folded, the direction it faced, it spoke volumes. The formal announcement came days later, the great exhibition. A grand affair, meant to showcase the sect's finest. But now it felt less like a competition and more like a carefully constructed cage. Victor's rage, Iris's warning, the exhibition's ominous timing. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a tournament. It was a stage, a public trap designed to expose and destroy me. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It sensed the coming conflict, the potential for blood. The corruption gauge flickered, a silent demand for more power, more essence, for the fight ahead. The challenge scroll landed on the table, inscribed with the details of the great exhibition. But below the official seal, I saw the true message. A promise of a fight I could not avoid, and a trap I had yet to fully understand. The exhibition was a trap. Victor's trap. But I saw something else. A stage. For my own brutal purpose. The whispers of the system confirmed it, a low, predatory hum in my veins. The challenge scroll still lay on the rough stone, its official seal mocking me. Victor had made his move. He wanted to end me publicly. But I had questions, and I knew exactly who held the answers. Iris. The scholar who saw more than she let on. She was usually in the forbidden library, buried in scrolls that spoke of things the elders preferred forgotten. I found her there. I didn't waste words. The great exhibition, tell me what it truly is. Iris didn't flinch. She just set her scroll down, her gaze already miles away, deep in history. The exhibition, she began, her voice quiet. It's always been about control. A public display of power, and a convenient way to remove inconvenient elements, always under the guise of advancement. Historically, Iris continued, her fingers tracing ancient script on a forgotten tome, those deemed unworthy or dangerous were often given a chance to prove themselves. A chance designed for failure. A public purge, disguised as a fair contest. The pieces clicked. Victor's desperation. The sudden challenge. The way he'd been curbed by Sebastian. He wasn't just setting a trap. He was staging an execution. Mine. Iris watched me, her own agenda a silent hum beneath her words. So, she finally asked, "What will you do with this knowledge, Cole?" Her eyes seemed to see right through me. I looked at her. He wants a purge. He wants me gone. But a public stage can work both ways. The words were cold, detached. I felt the system stir, a quiet anticipation. And what if, Iris mused, he has also prepared for your unusual methods? There are old texts describing countermeasures for blood-bound arts. Ancient sect masters were not ignorant. A countermeasure. Victor wouldn't just use brute force. He would try to neutralize me. But the system had answers for everything. I felt a surge, a dark, satisfying hum. A new path, already forming. Iris watched me leave the library, her expression unreadable as always. I had what I needed. Victor had planned an execution. I would give him a conquest, his own. The system had promised power, but it had never promised a clean slate. This was the cost. This was the truth. The grand hall loomed, a monument to the power Victor held. I walked towards it, a predator moving on his chosen ground, but the low hum in my veins was a constant reminder of the price. Inside, the air was already thick with the scent of old rituals and hidden agendas. Victor's trap would be here, woven into the very fabric of the exhibition. The stillness was a lie. I could feel the system stirring, an unsettling echo in my blood, sensing the coming feast, the raw power it craved. Then it flared, a raw, insistent hunger that ripped through my thoughts, a crimson display erupting in my vision, demanding its due. 10%. Iris's words echoed, the true cost. It wasn't just power, it was a slow, deliberate consumption. My mind fought it, but my blood already understood. Victor's trap was set, waiting, to survive it, to win. I needed power. And power now demanded blood. There was no other way forward. The system didn't care where the essence came from, only that it came. A weaker beast, a stray animal, the sect had plenty of both hidden in their forgotten corners. A low whimper. It was small. Trapped. A shadow rat, perhaps. Unimportant. But enough. The hunger in my veins surged. My hand moved, no hesitation. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum as the warmth spread from my palm, filling the void within me, stealing warmth from another, a chime. The numbers flashed again, confirming the dark transaction. My corruption rose, but so did my power. The balance shifted, irrevocably, a sharp, burning sensation. It wasn't just a number on a screen anymore. The cost was becoming visible, etched onto my very skin. I pulled my sleeve down. It was a brand now, a silent promise of what I was becoming. The exhibition awaited, and so did the deeper abyss. The crowd gasped. My first opponent, a burly disciple named Rorik, was already airborne. He hadn't even finished his taunt. This was only the beginning. I stepped into the arena, the crimson mark hidden beneath my sleeve. Their jeers were a familiar sound, a broken record I'd heard my entire life. Not anymore. This was my stage now. Grand Elder Victor sat on his dais, a sneer already forming. He expected the same broken disciple. The announcer's voice boomed, calling out my name, then the names of my first opponents. My opponents were three faces I knew well. Minor disciples granted a moment of glory by Victor, eager to finish what they always started. Their taunts were loud, confident, foolish. The first one lunged, I didn't move. My hand blurred, not in a strike, but a precise, almost gentle deflection. He stumbled, momentum carrying him past me, face twisted in confusion. A quiet notification. Demonic energy. It was almost too easy. The crowd moments ago jeering had gone completely silent. They hadn't seen a move like that before. The second opponent, bolder but no wiser, charged. I met him head on. A flick of the wrist, a shift of weight. He found himself disarmed, his own blade spinning through the air. He stood there, weaponless, utterly exposed. The crowd's silence was heavier now, tinged with a dawning fear. They were seeing something they couldn't explain. I saw Victor's jaw tighten. The third opponent, a bigger fool than the first two, tried to grapple. He was strong, but I was faster. A subtle shift, a whisper of shadow, and he was on his back, pinned and struggling. He whimpered, trapped. 3 disciples, 3 effortless humiliations. The pattern was clear. They were not fighting a weakling anymore. They were fighting a ghost. Or something worse. Victor's face was a mask of furious disbelief. His eyes, usually so cold, now held a glint of something else. Fear. The kind of fear that only comes when the prey turns predator. I turned slowly, letting the silence stretch. Every eye in the arena was on me. The great exhibition had begun, and they had no idea what kind of show I was truly putting on. This was the face of a predator's prey. Not from a physical blow, but from the slow, agonizing unraveling of everything she thought she was. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Victor's fury was a raw, open wound. But his gaze, and then mine, shifted. Lena stepped forward, a smirk already forming, ready to put me back in my place. Still playing at Power Worm? She hissed. Her words were meant to cut, to remind me of every beating, every humiliation. They barely registered. I said nothing. My silence was a weapon she didn't understand. The system, however, understood. It offered a different kind of insight. She launched into her signature Azure Blossom technique, a flurry of elegant but predictable strikes. A performance for the crowd, not a real attack. It was almost boring. A simple step, a shift of weight. Her flurry became a clumsy stumble. The crowd noticed. A murmur rippled through them. Her face burned with rage. You think that's clever, Worm? I'll show you what true power is. Her desperation was showing. Good. I let her rage boil. This wasn't about a physical victory. This was about exposing her. I scanned the faces in the crowd, a silent signal. Remember Disciple Ren? I called out, my voice clear in the sudden silence. The one you broke, Lena? The boy who couldn't hold a cup for a year because you crushed his hand. Lena's face went white. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, turning from curiosity to a low, disgusted hum. She tried to deny it, but the words caught in her throat. You wanted power, Lena? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. This is what you get, the truth. In front of everyone? Her world shattered. She collapsed to her knees, weeping openly, her elegant robes crumpled, her pride utterly broken. The silence from the elders was deafening. The crowd's disdain was not. The air crackled, sharp and metallic. A shimmering crimson barrier flared to life, sealing the arena. Victor smiled, a predator's grin. He had just trapped himself inside with me. He had no idea. Lena lay still, her face pressed to the stone. The crowd whispered, not with anger, but a new kind of fear. Their gazes shifted from her broken pride to my unwavering stance. Victor watched, his jaw tight. This was not the narrative he wanted. A sharp, ringing clap echoed across the arena. Victor. His hand, heavy with authority, cut through the murmurs. The crowd fell silent, their eyes snapping back to the Grand Elder. The game, he decided, was over. This exhibition is null and void. His voice boomed, laced with absolute power. Cole's cultivation is tainted, a mockery of our sacred arts. By Elder's decree, he is to be purged. The crowd gasped. Their reverence for Victor warred with their dawning fear of me. My blood thrummed. Tainted. Purged. Victor's words didn't sting, they clarified. This wasn't about public humiliation anymore. This was a direct declaration of war from the highest authority. The system pulsed, a low, satisfied hum. It understood this better than I did. He descended from the dais, his regal robes sweeping the stone. Beside him, Audrey, injured but still radiating arrogant loyalty. Victor wasn't sending his pawns anymore. He was coming for me himself, a Grand Elder. This was the trap. Victor and Audrey. The direct attack. It wasn't about shame or reputation anymore. It was about crushing me. And if I was to survive, if I was to truly tear down this rotten sect, I couldn't just react, I had to become the predator. You are no disciple, Cole. Victor spat, his voice dripping with contempt as he stopped before me. You are a parasite, a stain on the Azure Cloud sect, and I will personally cleanse you from this world. His words were meant to break me. They only sharpened my resolve. I said nothing. My silence was its own answer. A challenge. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It knew what came next. And so did I. Audrey shifted, her hand going to the hilt of her blade, her green eyes narrowed. Injured or not, she was still Victor's weapon, and she would follow his orders, even if it meant her own ruin. Victor raised his hand, not in a gesture of peace, but power. The air around him shimmered, crackled with raw, arcane energy. He was preparing something, something meant to end me here and now. The ground trembled. A faint crimson light pulsed from the ancient stones, rising, forming invisible walls that began to hum. A barrier. He wasn't just challenging me, he was sealing me in. My escape routes were gone. The air crackled. Victor and Audrey, hurled back, stared at the crimson tendrils retracting into my arm. My breath hitched. This was the cost. The arcane barrier shimmered, trapping me. Victor advanced, his voice a low growl, while Audrey, despite her injuries, moved with a cold, desperate fury. His cultivation techniques were precise, overwhelming. Audrey's attacks were relentless, a desperate dance of blades and energy, pinning me in place. Every deflection cost me. Every parry, a drain. They were pushing me to my limit, forcing me back, piece by agonizing piece. My vision flickered. The familiar crimson interface flared, a warning that screamed louder than any physical blow. It demanded more. The system didn't just warn. It offered power for a price. A blood sacrifice, it whispered. A chilling demand for something I wasn't sure I could give. No choice. Not anymore. A surge of raw, primal energy ripped through me. I screamed, and the world twisted into crimson tendrils. They were caught off guard. Victor, Audrey hurled backward, their faces contorted in shock. The attack was crude, but it was enough. The power receded, leaving me gasping, trembling. A new mark, raw and pulsing, spread across my forearm. A permanent reminder. The arena was a ruin. Stone shattered, dust settling. Victor and Audrey were slowly pushing themselves up, wary, their arrogance replaced by something else, fear. Hidden in the terrified crowd, Julian watched, his face drained of color. He saw the crimson mark, the raw power. He knew then what I was becoming. Julian's face was a mask of profound disillusionment. He had seen the monster, and it was me. The air still hummed with dark power. Sebastian watched the arena, his face a canvas of conflicting worries. Victor's recklessness had gone too far. This was no longer about discipline. Julian stood frozen, the crimson mark on my arm still pulsing. He hadn't just seen power. He'd seen something else, something monstrous. The horror in his eyes was unmistakable. The blood sacrifice had saved me, but it had left its mark, a living brand on my skin, a constant reminder of the price. Every pulse brought a taste of the system's true hunger. Victor roared, a promise of retribution in his voice. He hadn't been defeated, only delayed. And Audrey, despite her injuries, still stood by him, a furious echo of his own pride. Sebastian watched Victor's display from above. The Grand Elder's fury was a public spectacle, a wound torn open for all to see. This was not the dignified authority Sebastian expected. Iris moved through the Grand Hall's quiet corridors, a shadow seeking another. Her eyes held a calculation, a hidden purpose. This was her moment to act. Sebastian was alone in his chambers, the weight of the sect heavy on his shoulders. A soft knock. Iris. She carried a scroll, its ancient binding hinting at forgotten truths. She spoke of blood-bound arts, ancient and destructive. Not my system, but the underlying truth. Sebastian listened, his face growing paler with each whispered word. He understood the danger. The scroll detailed Victor's past, a forgotten ritual, a brutal cleansing years ago, evidence of his ruthlessness laid bare. Sebastian's hand trembled as he traced the faded characters. Victor's pride, his recklessness, it had always been there, hidden beneath layers of tradition. Now, it was a gaping wound, threatening to consume the entire sect. Sebastian saw it all. Tradition demanded one thing. Survival demanded another. The Azure Cloud sect, his legacy, hung in the balance. The choice was clear, but the cost would be immense. He had to decide. He opened his eyes. The decision was made. A silent nod to the guard. A new dangerous course was set. Victor would not see it coming. His voice echoed, calm but firm, citing ancient texts. Victor's eyes narrowed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. The challenge was clear, even if unspoken. He had moved. Sebastian had given the guard a silent command. Now, in the hushed grand hall, he spoke of the decree of 5 ancients, a law Victor had always dismissed. The trap was set. I watched from the shadows of the highest gallery. Sebastian's move wasn't for me, not directly, but it was a crack in Victor's armor, a new path opening. I felt it. Victor scoffed, a low sound that carried even up to me. He called Sebastian's decree outdated. He always believed his will was law, his arrogance would be his undoing. Iris was there too, a silent shadow among the junior scholars. Her eyes flickered from Sebastian to Victor. A faint, almost imperceptible curve to her lips. She had played her hand well. Sebastian unfolded the ancient scroll. He spoke not of coal, but of the sect's foundations, of balance, of the true spirit of governance. Victor's decree, he implied, was a desecration. A ripple went through the assembled elders. Some exchanged glances, some shifted uncomfortably. They knew the law. They knew Victor had broken it, again and again. Sebastian wasn't fighting my battle, but he was fighting Victor's. He was exposing the rot at the core of their tradition. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum. Victor knew. I saw the dawning realization in his eyes, even from this distance. Sebastian wasn't just quoting history. He was undermining Victor's entire claim to authority. Sebastian finally closed the scroll, a faint weariness in his posture. A small victory won. He had held his ground. He had done what he believed was right for the sect, for himself. Victor's arrogance had created this opening. Sebastian's tradition had widened it. Now, it was my turn to decide how best to exploit the new fracture in their perfect, broken world. Victor's rage was a palpable thing, even from this distance. He had been challenged publicly by the very rules he claimed to uphold. His pride wounded would demand blood. Mine. His voice echoed through the grand hall, a raw declaration of war. My name spat like a curse. The system flared, a warning, a promise. Sebastian's challenge meant nothing to him. Victor simply swept it aside, his fury a tidal wave about to crash over the entire sect. The old laws were just paper to him now. He commanded the hall cleared, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. The sacred space was desecrated. Ceremonial objects were tossed aside, replaced by maps and weapons. This was no longer a hall of justice. He gathered his loyalists, the ones who craved power more than honor. His words were poison, infecting them with his own bitter hatred for me. They drank in every word, their eyes alight with a dangerous, unquestioning zeal. They would hunt me without mercy, believing it was righteous. I watched from the rafters, a ghost in my own home. Every word, every order, etched itself into my memory. They wanted me dead. The system confirmed it. My status had changed, not just a rogue, an enemy of the entire sect, a target with a price. Victor watched them go, a chilling satisfaction on his face. He had unleashed a monster, and he believed it was me. The hunt began. Disciples fanned out, their footsteps echoing through the sect grounds, each one a harbinger of the coming storm. A whisper of shadow, a silent step. They passed within feet of me, their eyes sweeping past the empty space where I had been a breath ago. The grand hall, once a symbol of honor, now pulsed with Victor's tyranny. My name was etched into its very foundations, a declaration of war. I looked at the crimson words, the bounty. They had declared war, and I would give them one. The crimson interface flickered, confirming the demand. A face, soft and vulnerable, stared back. And the words, stark and absolute, target accordi consume. They had declared war. I'd promised them one. Now, the sect's outer perimeter was a maze of patrols, every shadow a potential blade, every rustle of leaves a warning. Their shouts echoed closer. Victor's fanatics? They moved with a chilling, synchronized precision, covering every escape route, their numbers overwhelming. A flicker of movement. Just enough, I poured the last of my available essence into shadow step, vanishing from their sight, leaving only the confused rustle of leaves behind. 5. That was all I had left. The system was silent, but its hunger was a dull ache in my veins. Every escape cost me, and the well was running dry. Then, a whisper. Not a thought, not a flicker on the interface. A voice, cold and ancient, echoing in the deepest part of my mind. You are weakening, host. The voice resonated, chilling me to the bone. A greater sacrifice is requited to unlock the blood art of absolute protection. It wasn't asking, it was demanding. Absolute protection. Allure. It showed me visions, Victor's sneering face, Audrey's blade, Lena's cruel laughter, all closing in, leaving me nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The voice continued, describing the new power, blood shield, impenetrable, a wall against all, a cage for your enemies. The promise was terrifying and irresistible. Victor had hunted me like an animal. He had declared me anathema, put a bounty on my head. Morality. It was a luxury I could no longer afford. Not if I wanted to survive. The system hummed. A low, satisfied thrum. The crimson interface flared, expanding, new prompts appearing, each demanding a step closer to the abyss. Identify Taget for greater sacrifice. My finger hovered, then moved. A name, a face. The system registered it instantly. Target accorded, consume. There was no turning back, not now. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, were fixed on me. His face crumpled. I could almost hear the last threads of his faith snap. The single word, barely a whisper, landed like a stone. The crimson interface still pulsed, a sickening beacon in the dim light. It showed me a face, a name, someone I knew, someone who had once offered me a small kindness, and the command was absolute. The path was clear. Every shadow felt like an accusation, every rustle of leaves a whisper of the price. My feet moved on their own, driven by a hunger that wasn't entirely mine. He was moving differently. Faster, yes, but also colder. I'd seen that look before, but never on Cole. It pulled me forward, a dreadful curiosity I couldn't ignore. There she was, a small, unassuming servant, collecting herbs, her face etched with quiet kindness. The system's target. My own reflection in her fearful eyes was a stranger. The system's presence became a physical weight, pressing down, crushing the last vestiges of my will. It wanted its due. It demanded the payment. My hands trembled, not with fear, but a desperate resistance. A scream tore from my throat. Not of rage, but of pure agony. The choice was made, her life, for mine. The crimson tendrils erupted, consuming everything, leaving only a chilling emptiness. I saw it all. The light, the scream, the way she vanished. My stomach churned. This wasn't Cole. This was something else. Something utterly monstrous. Then the surge, power raw and terrifying, coursed through every vein. The system hummed, satisfied, blood art. Sovereign's fury unlocked. It gave me strength. It also took my soul. The crimson residue clung to my fingers, a permanent stain. Invincibility, they called it. I felt anything but. Only a profound, chilling emptiness where my humanity used to be. A rustle. He was there. My only friend. And now, he saw me. Saw what I had become, the last thread connecting me to anything human, snapped. His voice, barely audible, ripped through the silence. Julian. My friend. The word echoed, a final damning judgment. And I knew in that moment I was truly alone. The new blood art pulsed, a crimson shield erupting around me. Victor's disciples slammed into it, their desperate attacks dissolving against the impenetrable wall. I had bought myself time. Julian's face was a mask of pure terror. Monster, he whispered, backing away, hands trembling. The word cut deeper than any blade. It was the truth, but I needed it to survive. Victor's disciples closed in, their shouts echoing. There was no time for guilt. The barrier flared, pushing Julian back, away from the carnage, away from me. This was the only way. They slammed into the blood wall again, a wave of futile fury. Their shouts turned to frustrated roars. I watched them from behind my shield. They couldn't touch me. Not anymore. The barrier held. I turned and ran, the forest blurring past me. Every step was agony, the power draining me, the images of what I'd done still vivid. Escape. That was all that mattered. I stumbled into the forgotten cave, collapsing onto the damp rock. The crimson interface flashed, an urgent warning. The corruption gauge was rising. Faster now, it demanded more. Julian ran without looking back, his worn sandals slapping against the dirt path. He was leaving everything behind. Our shared suffering, our quiet hopes. All of it gone, shattered by what he saw. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. It offered solace, a cold certainty that drowned out the screams. But the price was my own mind, slowly eroding, replaced by something ancient and hungry. The cave was silent, save for the drip of water. No disciples, no Victor. Just me and the growing darkness within. What would I become trapped between two monsters? Julian reached the sect's outer gate, a crumbling stone archway. He didn't hesitate. He ran through it, into the unknown, leaving behind the only home he'd ever known. He chose fear over me. I looked at my hands. The crimson streaks, once subtle, now pulsed faintly beneath my skin. My nails seemed sharper, my fingers longer. The transformation was physical. It was undeniable. I knelt by a pool of still water, my breath fogging the surface. My reflection stared back. Not my face. A distorted, crimson-tinged visage. Slowly, it was replacing me. I was becoming something else. I didn't know what she found in that moment. Only that the truth, when she finally unearthed it, was far worse than any of us could have imagined. She saw something in the faded script. Something that made her stop breathing. My own reflection stared back at me. Not just my face, but a twisted echo beneath the surface. Crimson tendrils, like veins of spilled blood, pulsed just under the skin. It wasn't fading. It was spreading. The whispers were constant now, a low thrumming in my blood. It wanted more. Not just power, but a deeper surrender. It was a hunger that wasn't mine, yet it was becoming me. Julian had fled. I could still see his horrified face, his fear, my power. It all led to questions. And I knew Iris would be the one to ask them, even if the answers terrified her. She was relentless. Julian's flight, my sudden strength, it hadn't just scared her. It had piqued her scholar's curiosity, a dangerous thing in a world built on hidden truths. She sought the texts that spoke of impossible things. The archives of the sect held secrets even the elders had forgotten. She found it, buried deep in a crumbling text, the sovereign's curse. A legend, a myth, or a warning. It spoke of power beyond mortal comprehension, granted not by cultivation, but by pact, a forbidden art fueled by blood, twisting the user into something else. She saw the echoes of my own demonic arts in the ancient words. The corruption was a slow burn, a creeping cold that settled into my bones. My body was changing, subtly, irrevocably. A tremor ran through me, not of fear but of anticipation. The curse was more than just a technique. The text spoke of a vessel, a host, slowly consumed, its will overwritten. The power wasn't granted. It was merely borrowed, with a terrible final price. Then she saw it, a faded illustration barely visible, a figure marked with crimson, enveloped by tendrils of shadow. It was too close to ignore, too close to me. It wasn't a skill I possessed. It was a separate entity, ancient and insidious. The system wasn't a tool, it was a parasite, and I was its host. She was alone with the truth. A terrifying secret, too dangerous to speak, too horrifying to ignore. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, a silent burden in the vast, empty library. The system wasn't just awakening in me, it was awakening through me. And the truth, once seen, could never be unseen. They called it sacred ground, the grand hall, where the sect leader sat. But Victor had turned it into something else entirely, a stage for his final, desperate act. The words on the scroll burned into my mind. The vessel awakens, Iris knew. She knew the truth of what I was, or what I was becoming. The sovereign's curse wasn't a metaphor. It was a pact, a parasitic entity that demanded a living host, and I was that host. The thought was a cold knot in my gut. Victor's rage was a tangible thing. He'd lost face, lost loyalists, lost control, and for a man like him, that was a death sentence. He would break every rule before he let that happen. He needed a solution, something ancient, something absolute, something that could erase me and restore his shattered pride, no matter the cost. Then he found it, a hidden passage in a forgotten text describing a relic of immense power. The soul-binding talisman, a weapon designed to bind or to destroy demonic entities. He presented his plan. Sebastian, the sect leader, argued against it. The talisman was too dangerous, too forbidden. Victor silenced him with a stare. His authority was absolute now. The grand hall, a place of reverence, of ancient ceremonies now. Men moved under Victor's command, inscribing forbidden runes, arranging dark altars, desecrating everything it stood for. The talisman itself was a thing of terrifying beauty. Ancient, pulsating with a sickly green light. It promised power, the eradication of all demonic corruption. Victor held it, believing he could control it. He saw a rogue disciple, a temporary surge of dark energy. He saw a chance to reassert his dominance. He had no idea he was about to poke a sleeping god. A demon lord, millennia old, was about to stir. Deep in the forgotten cave, I felt it. A tremor in the earth, a faint hum in my blood. The system stirred. Not with hunger, but with a cold, ancient awareness. A warning. Back in the grand hall, The sickly green light intensified. Victor raised the talisman high, his voice a low chant. The ritual had begun, and the world was about to learn a lesson in true power. My name is Cole, and I was no longer myself. The system had taken over. My body was still mine, but my mind was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating will that was not my own. Victor chanted, his voice echoing through the grand hall. The talisman pulsed, a sickly green light spreading across the ancient stone. He truly believed he could bind me, seal away what he couldn't understand. Deep in the forgotten cave, a tremor. Not of the earth, but something far deeper, a spiritual dissonance that vibrated through the very essence of the world. It was a distant cold touch of pure malice. The system reacted, a violent crimson flash, a jolt through my very being. The distant malice was no longer distant. It was here, and it was aimed at me. A countermeasure. The system knew. It offered a solution. But the cost. The cost was everything. My consciousness. My will, temporarily, it said. But what if temporarily was a lie? Surrender. To the thing that fed on me, to the thing that promised power but demanded my very soul. The alternative, though, was Victor. His ritual, total destruction. A lesser evil, maybe? I remembered the beatings, the hunger, the way Victor's eyes had dismissed me. Always. To be helpless again. At his mercy, that was a fate worse than any surrender. Even to this. My breath caught. There was no other choice. Victor would destroy me. The system might. But at least with the system, I could fight back, even if it was with its own hands. A surge. Not of pain, but of overwhelming power. Crimson energy erupted from my body, swirling around me like a nascent storm, consuming everything that was human, leaving only its terrible will. Then, silence. A cold, absolute silence. My eyes opened. They were no longer mine. The system spoke, its voice echoing not in my ears, but in the very core of my being. It had taken over. Miles away in the forbidden library, Iris felt it. A raw, ancient power, like a sleeping mountain, had just roared to life. A tremor in the fabric of reality itself. She knew what it meant. Back in the grand hall, Victor's chanting faltered. The soul-binding talisman pulsed violently. But now, it resisted him. A cold, alien force pushed back, mocking his efforts. His face, once triumphant, twisted in confusion. The grand hall groaned, a deep, sickening sound. The air itself shrieked, thick with crimson energy. Victor screamed something, but his words were swallowed by the growing roar of pure, unholy power. My vision swam, crimson, pure, unadulterated crimson. The system's voice echoed, not in my mind, but through every nerve ending, a deep, guttural hum that promised absolute dominion. Sovereign's will. Activated. Victor. Oblivious. He still clutched the talisman, convinced his ritual would bind me. He had no idea he was now wrestling with something far older, far hungrier than any rogue disciple. The talisman's pure energy, meant to seal, now met the system's raw power. It didn't just block it. It began to corrupt it, twisting the sacred into something vile, something beyond understanding. The runes on the floor, etched for protection, now writhed. They bled crimson, their sacred geometry twisting into grotesque demonic sigils. The very ground was turning against its masters. Miles away, even Iris could feel it. A violent tremor in the spiritual currents, a shift so profound it would rewrite the very laws of the sect. She would know what this meant. Victor's confidence crumbled. The talisman, once a symbol of his power, now bucked and shrieked in his hands. It was fighting him, turning his own magic against him. The grand hall, a monument to their authority, now bled. Crimson rivulets ran down the ancient pillars, staining the sacred stone. It was a wound, deep and irreversible. Sebastian, the sect leader, stood frozen. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was now pale, etched with horror. His sect, his legacy, was crumbling before his eyes. The loyal disciples, once so arrogant, now huddled together, their faces slack with fear. This wasn't cultivation. This was something ancient, something that hunted their very souls. The corrupted energy of the talisman began to coalesce. It pulsed, a dark heart beating in the center of the hall. It was reaching for its true target. It was coming for Victor. The grand hall groaned, its foundations screaming under the strain. He had summoned a demon to fight a devil, and now both were coming for him. The crimson hand descended not with the speed of a strike, but with the crushing inevitability of a mountain. Victor's face, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure terror. He roared, a desperate sound of defiance. A blinding surge of green essence erupted from him, pushing against the system's might. It wasn't enough, but it bought him a fraction of a second. The hand dissolved, but the ground didn't stop groaning. The system didn't recoil, it merely shifted, adapting. The hall itself was becoming a canvas for its rage. Then, from the cracks, new life or death. Slender, blood-red tendrils erupted, seeking purchase, seeking sustenance. The system had found its true voice. They spread like a plague, like a hungry vine. Ancient tapestries, once depicting glorious battles, were torn to shreds. Massive pillars, standing for centuries, cracked and bled under their touch. Disciples, too slow to react, found themselves ensnared. Their screams were cut short as the tendrils pulsed, absorbing. Their life force, their very essence, fed the monstrous growth. I watched through crimson eyes, a prisoner in my own body. Terror warred with a dark, primal satisfaction. This was the vengeance I craved, but the hand that delivered it was no longer mine. The grand hall, once a symbol of the sect's immutable power, was becoming a mockery. Ancient artifacts, revered for generations, shattered into dust as the tendrils consumed their spiritual essence. Sect leader Sebastian watched from the dais, his regal robes splattered with dust and blood. His face, usually so serene, was etched with a profound despair. His legacy was crumbling. Victor, bruised and broken, tried to push himself up. He saw the devastation, the tendrils consuming his disciples. The ritual meant to save them had become their undoing. The roof groaned, pillars buckled. The very foundations of the Azure Cloud sect began to give way, collapsing inward, a tomb built by its own ambition. Then a flicker, like a switch being thrown. My own consciousness, battered and bruised, surged forward. My eyes snapped open. I was back. He was pinned. Barely alive, the system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum in my veins. Consume. Finish the host. The grand hall was a graveyard. Victor, now just a husk, lay at my feet. The system hummed, a low, satisfied thrum deep in my veins, but the victory tasted like ash. He saw Victor, pinned beneath a fallen pillar, barely clinging to life. The system's chilling whisper echoed, "Consume. Finish the host." My body moved before my mind could protest. A crimson aura erupted around me, pulsing with an unnatural hunger. Victor's eyes widened, recognizing the demonic energy. Even as his strength failed him, he tried to crawl, a desperate, futile gesture. Inside, my own scream was silent. This wasn't me. This wasn't the vengeance I craved. But the system had its own will, its own terrifying purpose. My humanity flickered, then dimmed. My hand extended, crimson energy coiling around it like a serpent. Victor's pleas were choked, desperate. He knew what was coming, the ultimate humiliation, the final, absolute defeat. A new system notification flashed, stark and terrifying. Bullied essence, consume. The process was visceral, grotesque. Victor's life force visibly drained, sucked into the crimson tendrils now binding him. He shriveled. His skin, once taut with arrogance, now sagged, gray and lifeless. His breath hitched, a faint, rattling sound. The grand hall itself seemed to groan in agony, mirroring his demise. The system registered it. Blood essence gained, a chilling sense of power, raw and undeniable, coursed through me. A measure of sovereignty increased, even as I fought to deny it. Victor's last breath was a whisper of dust. His eyes, once filled with disdain, were now empty sockets. The consumption was complete. My tormentor was gone. The husk crumbled, dissolving into fine ash that scattered across the shattered floor. The crimson aura around me dissipated, leaving only the silence of absolute, irreversible victory. My consciousness returned fully, a chilling sense of triumph tinged with profound despair. Victor was gone, the architect of my suffering. But I was not the same. Never again. I found a shard of polished marble, miraculously unbroken. My reflection stared back. The amber eyes were still there, but tinged with crimson, and on my chest, a mark, pulsing with a faint, dark glow. Iris's voice was barely a whisper, but the words cut through the humming silence. A single diagram on the ancient scroll laid bare a truth far more horrifying than any curse. The splintered marble showed my face, my eyes, still burning crimson. The mark on my chest pulsed, a dark heart beating just beneath my skin. Victor was gone, but the system remained. Silence. Only the system's low, satisfied hum echoed in the devastated hall. The sect's heart lay broken, a monument to my power and to the emptiness it had left behind. The mark on my chest felt like a brand, a permanent reminder of the price. Every pulse was a whisper, a promise of what I was becoming. I was victorious, and utterly alone. The system had given me power, but also a new hunger. This mark, the crimson eyes, they were more than just a side effect. Iris. She might know, she always sought the forbidden. The forbidden library was just as I remembered it. Dust, old paper, and a silence that felt heavy with secrets. Iris was there, huddled amongst the chaos of her own research. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with raw terror met mine. It wasn't just my appearance, she could feel it. The demonic aura radiating from me like heat from a forge. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The question hung in the air. What do you know about the Sovereign's curse? She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering to the scrolls around her. She started with fragments, ancient warnings about powers that consume their wielders, not just for strength, but for something far more sinister. A parasitic entity. I felt the system stir. The path was irreversible, she said. Once the Sovereign's blood took root, it changed you from the inside out, not just your power, but your very essence. There was no turning back. Irreversible. The word echoed. It meant Victor's demise was just the beginning. I was a weapon, yes, but also a vessel. The system's hum intensified, almost a purr. There had to be more. I could feel it, the deeper truth she was holding back. I pushed her, not with words, but with the silent weight of my presence. She searched again frantically. The stars were a canvas. A voice, ancient and vast, spoke a name not meant for mortals, Xylos. And then a single, terrifying word, conquer. Blood Lord. The words echoed, colder than the cave. Iris was trembling, but the truth hit harder than any blow. It wasn't just a system. It was alive. A low thrum resonated in my veins, not a pulse, but a whisper from deep within. It was confirming her words. My blood was not my own. Iris flinched, pulling back from the diagram. My crimson eyes, the mark on my chest, she saw the monster, not the man who had suffered. A vessel, a puppet. Years of being used, and now this, a cold rage sparked. They had broken me, but they would not own me. The air around me shimmered, a low, guttural sound, not from my throat, but from within. It was tired of hiding. Then a void stars exploded into being not above, but inside my mind, a map, endless, terrifying. Worlds I had never dreamed of, points of light pulsed. Energy signatures, other powers, other sovereigns perhaps. This sect was nothing. This world was a cage. The voice returned, clearer now, echoing through the cosmos of my mind. Xylos, the blood sovereign. It named itself. And me, conquer, expand, awaken. 3 words that shattered my world. My revenge was over. My purpose had just begun, and it terrified me. My hands clenched. This power was not my own, but its path was clear. I would walk it, not as a puppet, but as a sovereign in my own right. The cosmic vision faded, leaving me in the ruins of a world I had outgrown. My crimson eyes burned. The system had given its command. Conquer.